Hello, a very warm welcome to my YouTube this evening. We're going to take a look at the Supermarine Walrus. It's a very interesting little aircraft that first came into service with the Royal Navy and the RAF in 1936. So sit tight, pin your ears back, and hope you enjoy the film.
Over 10,000 people were picked up by the air-sea rescue squadrons during the war, and every single such rescue boasted the morale of all involved. One of the most famous rescue aircraft was the little Supermarine Walrus amphibian, or Shagbat, as it was affectionately known. Designed as a catapult aircraft for use on battleships, it entered service in 1936.
Later deck types, which have been designed for the King George V and Fiji class ships, the aircraft in the two hangars are stowed on the catapult trolley superstructure from which they are launched. A fueling and defueling system is provided in each hangar, from which flexible pipes are brought to the aircraft fuel tanks. Aircraft can also be fueled or defueled on the catapult. This shows the small aircraft Zwicky hand pump being used. A larger ship's Zwicky hand pump will further increase speed of defueling. If required to carry out bombing, the aircraft would now be armed by aircraft ratings. Each bomb is supplied by a gunner's or supply party using a special bomb loading stretcher. The bomb is then raised to the rack by a loading winch and is engaged in the rack by the armourer. The aircraft should by now have been manned by the crew and a fitter with the handle ready to start the engine when required. Aircraft ratings are stationed with lines rove ready to spread the wings as soon as the aircraft is clear of the hangar. The pilot verifies that all loose gear in the aircraft has been secured. The directing officer now directs the aircraft to be loaded on, and the catapult officer orders the control worker or rating detail to traverse the bogie clear of the hangar. Meanwhile, the directing officer verifies from the pilot that the aircraft weight is between the maximum and minimum permissible for catapulting, taking care that the estimated catapult speed does not exceed the maximum launching speed of the catapult, as laid down in the drill. He has also to ensure, in collaboration with the captain, that the aircraft is launched within the limiting wind conditions. He then tells the pilot that he may run up his engine to test it. While the engine is running up, he checks the clearances between the rear hooks and rear spools. He then receives the pilot's affirmative signal and reports to the directing officer that the catapulted aircraft are cleared away. This is transmitted to the captain by telephone and transmitter. The control worker, at the order of the catapult officer, maneuvers the trolley to the firing position, and the main cylinder is vented at this stage. He uses a blue hand flag owing to the noise of the aircraft engine. The directing officer informs the captain by telephone and transmitter that he is ready to launch. The directing officer circles his flag. The pilot sees that his crew are ready and runs up his engine. He raises his hand above his head in view of the directing officer and cuts it down. The directing officer waits a pause and drops his flag. The control worker puts over his launching lever smartly and away she goes. He drops slightly. It's a crosswind. If the ship were rolling, the launch would be started on an upward roll.
Well, we're going over to Duxford, where Keith Jones filmed the Walrus Project that is currently based at Duxford, and this goes now under the registration GWLRS, serial number W2718, and it's been through quite a checkered history. Very kind of Keith to let us use his footage, and we'll carry on and have a good look around at the aircraft. And this is where the one of the few remaining Walrus restoration projects is currently living, and this particular Walrus has been through quite a checkered past, and it was found back in the day by Dick Melton when it was believe it or not, it was a caravan, and he took it on as a project. It's actually a 1934 built, and the registration serial number is W2718. Distinct possibility that this aircraft will be restored to a flying condition, which will be a first for the Walrus since way back in the 1960s.
5 years later.
The trouble with the Walrus was that it was designed in about 1920, and it would have faded away but for the war. It was a very strongly built amphibian, which was meant to have a crew of 3. And when you even flew with a crew of 2 and landed and picked up 8 Americans, because they were always the heaviest, they were big chaps, clad in lots of clothing which was soaking wet. And by the time they got onto the aeroplane, you had to shut the windows, stop the sea coming in, because you literally only had 18 inches above the surface before you came to the window. And with all these 10 people on board, I remember trying to take off once like that, and I got as far full throttle for about 10 minutes, and I was doing 4 knots. And eventually we taxied all night and were picked up by a boat, by a motor gunboat who transferred all the Americans on. And then I couldn't take off because I was so full of water. So we taxied on into England with some fuel brought over. Very wet, very cold, not dangerous, but we had lots of fun.
Later, the Walrus was replaced by the Sea Otter, a longer-range version, the last biplane ever to see service with the RAF.
For night operations, an exactly similar procedure is carried out. Shaded torches are used for passing all the necessary signals. The most important ship's fittings in use are painted white. Cranes should also be marked to facilitate luffing and training to the required loading position. Now here are some reminders for the pilots. Remember those wheels. This actually shows a Nimrod ship plane during a special trial. But see what happens if you don't have a recognized drill amongst your crew for checking the position of the wheels before you land. And another one. See that your passenger, as well as the gear, is correctly strapped in before you are launched. This episode happened some years ago. The passenger hung on and was only bruised, but think what might have happened. These are some correct landings in rougher weather. Notice the technique. He brings the aircraft in slowly and flies it onto the water with the tail down and using plenty of engine. Then, using the minimum of power necessary, He flies a few feet above the tops of the waves until a spot for landing is selected. He then throttles right back, holds off as long as possible, and makes a fully stalled landing from about 6 feet. He's prepared to give a good burst of engine to ease the aircraft down if it bounces. Notice that the tail of the aircraft touches the water first, and the landing is as smooth as could be expected. Amphibian aircraft can land safely in rougher seas than floatplane types.
One aeroplane in particular, you know, we've got that Supermarine Walrus sitting next door, which the new owner of it came to us. He said, "I know you boys can do this."
Wow.
So
you're restricting Supermarine Walrus to flight?
Yeah. So, and he, like you said, "I know you are the people that can do this."
Wow.
And so that's an exciting thing. We get a lot of pleasure from doing the different things and doing them well.